are Masters Radio, an online music community finding ways to enjoy and support the master artists who created the soundtracks to our lives. We can show that musicians on our platform will benefit from increased exposure, engagement, healthcare, and other benefits, fundraising, and growth opportunities that empower them to thrive. Today, we welcome a founding member of one of the most influential bands in the history of popular music. He picked up the sticks in a Crawley schoolyard in 1976 with his friend Robert Smith and helped invent a sound that a whole generation is still chasing. He is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, the author of Cured and Goth a History, two books, half of the Curious Creatures podcast, and next month, he is coming to my hometown, Leesburg, Virginia, for the Crossroads Music Festival to help raise money for 5 children's charities. Lol Tolhurst, welcome to Masters Radio.
No, thank you. That was quite an introduction. Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope to deserve it one day. Good. Thank you.
So on September 19th, you're at the Tally Ho Theater, one of my favorite venues here, as part of the Crossroads Music Festival. It is put on by a group called Benefit, which is a nonprofit coalition of musicians, and the money goes to 5 Loudoun County, it's our county, children's charities, Diaper Bank, a food pantry, an education foundation, Loudoun Youth and the Salvation Army. The list changes each year, but it's always about typically very needy charities. You get asked to do a lot of things. What is it about this one that made you say yes?
I think mainly it's because it has music involved, so that's a no-brainer for me straight away. But also, it's because it's children's charities, and I do work for another children's charity where we raise money really to buy instruments for underserved children in various places. You can't afford, a drum kit or a guitar, and we hope to put the next generation of musicians on the road. So it's something that's close to my heart. I'm a father, and I've been lucky enough to be able to help my son in lots of ways, but having a child nowadays is a complicated process, and I'd like to help out. I'd like to help parents out as well wherever. So that's really the motive there.
Wonderful. Okay, that's also our whole idea behind both Benefit and it's not far from what we're trying to do at Masters Radio, which is music pointed at something, finding
Right.
ways to provide benefits for those people who mostly really need it.
Right.
Pardon me. So, what's interesting about your Crossroads slot is that you're not playing.
No.
You're billed for an intimate conversation about the music and stories behind The Cure, and then
Yeah.
a book signing.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's let me think about this really. Well, you think about the Cure, we've been around almost 50 years, right, as a band. So that's a very long time. So it doesn't make us young. But so I started maybe 15 years ago to think about things that I like to do, and I'd always been, an avid reader and everything. I was like, well, I've got a lot of stories, so I can write. And I started writing, and I started enjoying it so much because it's very similar to making music, except you're usually by yourself. You're not necessarily with a group of people doing it, but and it seems to take a little longer, but I enjoyed the process completely. It's very creative. So I sort of got stuck to that, and then a friend of mine called me up from New York, and he said, "Oh, are you still thinking of writing a book?" And I said yes, and he sort of called my bluff because at that point he went, "Well, I have a good friend who's coming to Los Angeles where I live to start up a new publishing operation, and you should meet him." And I went, "Oh, okay, I suppose I will." And he's still my editor today, that guy, like 12 years on or whatever. So it was a good thing to do, and quite terrifying at first because it's one thing to to write, to be at college or something and write a 2,000-word essay. It's another whole kettle of fish to, suddenly think about 100,000 words that have to kind of make sense with each other and work and stuff, and have to be interesting enough to people to want to read them. So that started up something that I've done now for the past few years where I go places and I talk, I read from my books. I've got a third book that I'm writing right now, which will come out early next year, I think. But I'm sort of sewing it all together. And let's be honest, like a book tour or a talking tour, because I do sort of both, and sometimes I play as well, so you never know. But I've done it all over the world. They're very, let's be honest, they're much simpler than a rock tour. Your crew is probably one or two people at the most, and you're finished by 8:30, and you can go out for dinner. So but I like to meet people. I like to meet people that have followed my old band and follow what I'm doing now, and it's it's a really it's a really good way of connecting with people because everything's on the internet now. Even us right now, we're here on the internet. But I found when the Cure first came to America in probably 79, 80, we played a lot of colleges, we played a lot of small towns, we played everywhere for months on end, and it really benefits bands to do that kind of thing. I don't know so much now, but maybe it still does, because I meet people now in my different events that saw us, way back, then and stuff, and they've followed things ever since, and we've become. I like to tell people, well, we've become sort of like the local band in a lot of these places that came from 5,000 miles away. It's like they've adopted us the whole time. And it's very interesting to see how people's lives have changed and stuff. And, and I meet people, of course, I did an event in San Francisco a few months ago, and, I meet people from 16 to 60. So the band is, goes across all generations, and people come up to me and say, oh, uh, oh, would you sign this? And they're young people, and I think, well, yeah, that's good. They say, well, my mother or my father really love you. So far, I've avoided my grandmother likes you or whatever. That's I'm sure that's coming 10 years down the line, but if I last that long, but it's nice to see the whole community of music and reading and arts, surviving and keeping together, and that's what I really enjoy.
It sounds like one of the questions I was going to ask you is how does it feel to be standing up on a stage talking versus playing? I think you've just answered it. You enjoy the both.
Yeah, I enjoyed the whole thing, and I'm so I was kind of born for it because if I step on stage, I think my heart rate probably goes down a little bit. I feel very comfortable there. It's like sitting in my living room or lounge or whatever. And I very rarely get stage fright, and so I don't know. And I was thinking about it the other day, back when Robert and Michael and I were at school together, the first in the Cure, we would do plays at school, and I was always, involved in parts of that, and I always enjoyed it. And we would do terrible musical operas and things, which were kind of funny, but um, yeah. So it's really, it's been my whole life, and I had to wait until the latter part of my life to understand why it was and how it came about and what it was for, because when you're in your 20s and 30s, you know what you're doing, sort of, but not really, and you don't really understand its meaning and what it's really for, and you're just doing it. You're just going from one thing to the next to try and do something, and it's great to be this age and reflect on that and see where it goes and see what it's done, and where we need to do more things.
Yeah, I do. We've actually heard that quite a number of times. Our cohort of people, all the people I've interviewed, for example, are people first popular 20 years ago or more. And
Right.
so if you do the math on that, you recognize when they were in their 20s, they were just wondering, can I feed my family with my guitar, or in your case, drums?
Right.
That's
Right.
all they care about. After 20 years or so, they've proven that point, and they're now thinking about how can I get back, or what else can I do? You mentioned community before, and I think February it was, you launched something in Santa Cruz, one of my favorite towns. Love to
Yeah.
stay there. Called Legends Live and Local,
Right.
putting
Right.
artists of your generation together with working local bands. You mentioned that
Yeah.
before. Nobody's written about that I've been able to find that much about. So tell me about it. What made you want to build a mentorship program?
I think it's like one, there's a selfish motive. Santa Cruz is quite a nice place to visit, but also, I I do want to give back. My son has two bands at the moment, and I see how hard it is for a band now to get off the ground. Like when the Cure first came, like I said, when the Cure first came here, we would play a lot of colleges and things. And if we had 4 or 5 gigs a week, we could do it for months on end. We could support ourselves. We could pay for the gas for the van. We could pay for somewhere to stay. We could feed ourselves. Uh, Now, I think it's very much harder for bands to start out on that thing, because on that path, because once you play a show, maybe you get enough money from the show, unless you have, like, everybody has to have merch now to sell, because otherwise they're not going to eat. So yeah, I've seen it. It's a lot harder to do at that level than it used to be. I mean, when we started, there were hundreds of bands, circulating around, doing the same kind of thing as us, and surviving on touring. And it was a way to do. Also, we were kind of pragmatic when we started off. We got an advance from the record company when we first started, and we didn't go out and spend it all on fast cars and stuff and things. Now we were like, okay, we'll pay ourselves a wage each week, and that will cover our costs, and that'll give us the space to be able to do it, because half the battle really is getting that space to be able to do it. Like, my son, like I say, he has two bands, but he also has a full-time job, and getting space from that to be able to go and do things, very difficult for them. And basically, from the time I was finishing college, and I had the choice, like, carry on, get the last bit of college, or the band, and so weighing those two things, and I chose the band. But I think really since that time, I've just supported myself and survived on of what I've done with this, and so that's, I feel very humbled by it, and very grateful, to be able to have done it. So yeah, I like to give things back if I can.
That reminds me of, when you look at a young band today, for example, trying to start from nothing, maybe your son's bands are
Yeah.
right in this mix. What do they have that you didn't when you started, and what did you have that they'll never get?
Right. Well, I think it's obviously we didn't have the internet, we didn't have anything like that at all. So to convince people or to show people who we were, we had to physically go to show them. We had to turn up in your town. Otherwise, you're not going to see us on YouTube. You're not going to see us on TikTok, because it wasn't there. And I think that's a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, the internet definitely makes things available worldwide pretty quick. Uh, Before, it used to be really radio. Radio was like, I would listen wherever I went around the world, and I would always hear, a lot of the same music, not always, but different. Music was the communication for people. But I think when we started, because we started as sort of like just at the time punk started, we knew what we had to do was go and talk to people, show it to people, show what we do, who we are, and that's a very powerful thing. And I think um, just to turn up and just to be in front of people and say, look, this is what we want to show you, this is what we believe, this is how we believe it, um, is very strong. Probably stronger than social media, even though you might not think so. But you know, it's that's the main difference. I think that you know that we had to sort of tour around 6 months, and then 6 months later had to come back again, because otherwise, you don't keep the momentum going. So also, back then college radio and stuff was very important, and it would introduce us to people. Uh, I think that's a basic thing. I mean, I see, I go and see bands with my son that he likes or whatever, and it's still the same thing. It's just, it's in a different framework, but it's the same thing, and I understand why people like what they like, because, it's a change from your life, and it's a connection that helps you, with your life, hopefully, because it always helped, growing up.
Okay. Yeah, social media, as you said, the breadth of attention is obvious. You're going to get huge numbers of people will get a whiff of
Yeah,
what you have, but to get to breathe it in and to really be a connected part of it, that involves getting in front of you guys live,
yeah,
and seeing it actually happen, a human connection. We
yeah,
certainly it's a mentorship program. We recognize that as well. We have a number of artists like you wanting to give back, and we've partnered with the Beam, which is kind of like us, except the opposite. They only work with musicians that haven't made it yet, or I
right,
shouldn't
okay,
grading, but what I mean is they weren't first popular 20 years ago, and they were probably never signed to a major label. Uh,
right,
so there's lots of places to hear that music, and their model, of course, is to have charts so that the popular vote, as it were, grows,
right,
and online, similar to what you see on the various talent TV shows that are going on these days. So yeah, it's good. You're absolutely right that it really involves being there, not in a moment, being there for an hour, and
yeah,
whether it's talking about a book or whether it's talking about your music or playing music,
yeah.
drums or keyboards, uh, you're going to make the more lasting impression with the latter. Speaking of which, I don't know. I've not seen anybody give you a reason, so I'm going to ask because
Mm.
it's a little biography about me. I started out at 13 playing drums. Uh,
Okay.
I don't own a drum set anymore. I play keyboards. And I'm
Yeah.
curious what made you switch? How did
Well,
moving off the
again,
throne change
I think as if you look at the orchestra, the timpani are right there next to the piano, so it's a rhythm instrument, right? So
Mhm.
keyboard. So it's like I didn't have to think about where I was going to put my fingers on the guitar strings, and stuff and that, and I could figure out, okay, I can play this. And I had a piano at home as a kid, and except my sister commandeered that. She had the piano and I had the drums, and she was playing the piano, and she became a music teacher. So, um, actually, I got to be honest with you. The older I've got, the more I've gone back to my drums, because you know, I have three kits here at home. So I'm like, I like, and it's good, as you get a bit older as well. It's very good to play, because your body will go, oh, I remember how we did this, but you got to do a little more work now to make sure that this actually happens. Um, I don't know, and it's visceral. I like the feeling of that. I originally started playing keyboards as well, though, because I liked. I was fascinated by what you could do with electronics, and how you could, and that started with the drums first, because I had like a sort of smattering of electronic drums that came out in the early 80s, and I always put those together, and I like that. Now, in fact, I have a totally electronic kit that looks completely like the original acoustic kit, but it's not, you know.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's absolutely beautiful, and it works great. You know, I'm going on tour later this year to England and France, and I'll play this thing, and it, sound engineers love it because, every night it sounds exactly the same, because it is the same sound coming out. There's no microphones and nothing. It's the same sound coming out. Um, in fact, sometimes I have to turn it off to convince myself that I'm not actually playing an acoustic kit because it sounds so realistic. Um, but so I like both things, and I like the electronic side of keyboards because you can make a sound of anything, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed like modular synthesis and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, I still have a passing interest in that, but I think I've become in my latter years more attached to the drums. Maybe they'll keep me alive longer, as well. I'm thinking that's it. I mean, I remember going uh, with Robert actually when we were younger to go to see the Clash play because they played in our hometown and they had specials with them, and they also had American bands, Suicide. They had them on tour with them, and it was just great. That one night, we were probably about 16, dancing around in this huge place and listening to the sort of and the Clash. Like I could look at them. I watched Topper and stuff and playing, and I was thinking, okay, I can do that. I could do that. It wasn't like 5 years beforehand, watching, people like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, great, but I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. So,
Pretty big spectrum in between. You could have found your
um,
groove. I think. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, punk really was our blues, that's where it came from, and Joe would be like, well, all you need is, that thing, three chords and the truth,
Right.
and I understood that,
Very good. Very good. So now, you and Budgie from Sushi and the Banshees have been doing
Yeah.
this podcast show, Curious Creatures, for a few
Yeah.
years now.
Well, it's on
Or,
it's on a bit of a hiatus at the moment
is
because
it?
we've done
Okay.
about 100 shows and that. So I think I'm going to do another podcast that goes along with my new book, which it'll be not quite the same, but it's my new book. So people ask me what is it about, and I tell them, well, it's self-help for goths, and so that usually makes people smile,
Yeah.
but it has a serious side, a very serious side. No, I thought, well, I want to write this. The first book I wrote, because it's a trilogy of books that I've done, and the first book is really the story of how the Cure started, how the band started, and where we came from, and why it became what it was. And then the second book, Goth the History, is really trying to show people like, okay, these are the influences. This is where we drew things in, and these were who we felt were our contemporaries, and how that whole thing meshed together. And this third book, which I should talk about at Crossroads as well, is really what do you do with all of that information and that experience and knowledge? How do you use it to help your life, others' lives? How do you define what it is you've learnt?
Mhm.
So that's really what it's about. But so I'm going to do a podcast that will go along with that. That will have different people involved. But Budgie, I heard from him the other day. He's doing some kind of musical theatre in Berlin right now. So we're all busy guys.
That'll keep you young. Well, it sounds like either in the prep for the third book or because of the 4 years of the podcast,
Yeah,
you may have learned something about your own generation talking to all those other people that participated in it that you didn't know when you started.
yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
did that reveal to
absolutely.
you going through and asking those
Well,
people?
it revealed lots of different things to me. I think the most surprising thing to me was I know through friends, family, friends and stuff. I know very well what one the world's top skateboarder, right? For years, the last
Mhm.
couple of years he was in, Thrasher, he was like the head. I didn't realize that a lot of those guys, and they're young, they're in their early 20s or whatever, and that they listen to what we played. And that's what they will skate to. And they were telling me, what, yeah, because it's the rhythms. We like the rhythms. Works very well with skateboarding, And I had never, that was something I had never connected at all, but it made perfect sense, So for uh, the album I did with Budgie, we did a video with Mason Silver, who was, still one of the greatest skateboarders around right now. So that was a revelation. The other revelation was, let me think. Well, most of the people that we talk to, they have a similar experience to us in the music world, but just like the focus is always like slightly, you know, different depending on where you came from and what time things happened. So um, that was very interesting. It was just good to talk to people and try and not just keep it down to well, then you did this and then you did that, but try and sense what difference it makes to you as a person to live this life, which is, you know, rather different than a lot of people's lives.
Absolutely true. Very
Mm.
good. So you did mention the podcast and the new book coming out, and of course you're touring Europe. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know if we're going to see you over here or not. Any plans for that, or for another album with Budgie or with others?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm still writing music. I did some I had actually after Santa Cruz, there's a studio up near Santa Cruz which is now called, I'm wearing a t-shirt actually, 2200 in Sausalito, which used to be the old record plant where
Oh, okay. Yeah. Mhm.
by like Fleetwood Mac and
I've been there. Yep. Hmm.
Stone. Yeah, it's beautiful, right? So
Hmm.
they came along to the guy that owns it, came along to the thing I did on Santa Cruz and said, well, would you like to come and record something in the studio? And I said, yeah, sure, because I've never been there and I've heard all about it. So, and it just happens to be about 15 minutes from where my son lives in San Francisco. So I said to my son Gray, let's write a couple of songs and let's go over. So we did, and we went and we recorded a couple of. Oh, it was great studio. So we had a great time. So I may explore more of that. Also, apart from a new book, which by the way I shall give you the title. It's called the Goth Optimist.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's like different things in there. Anyway, um, you know, provisional title, but I think it'll stay. And I wrote a play for the first time in my life with a couple of friends. So, I've been busy. I've been busy back in the woodshed. This is not the woodshed. This is my wife's little studio that she has. But I have two friends. One who's in puts a lot of concerts on at places like the Hollywood Bowl and stuff, and was involved with the orchestra there for years. And then another friend who's in theatre world, and we were talking one day, and we are like, well, we should just write this. This would make a great play, and so we've been writing a play for the last 2 years, and it's finally, yeah, I think it might get a preview soon. So. And it's a comedy, which I never thought. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life that weren't supposed to be comedic, but ended up comedic, like most people. But yeah, no, this is a sort of a dark comedy, and it's an immersive play. So you can put it in. It doesn't need necessarily to be just in a theatre because it will involve a lot of people in the audience. He said being very yeah mysterious, but yeah, look, so yeah, I'm keeping busy with things for sure.
Sounds like it's really interesting. And you mentioned Gray, and we've got, let's see, Gary Hoy has his son playing in his band. Will Turpin has his son playing in Collective Soul with him. Any
Yeah.
thoughts for you adding a family member into your,
Oh yeah, no,
your lineup?
already have. You know, like I went on to last year. Well, I had done a tour with Budgie and I went on tour with Mickey Bereni, who used to be in Lush, the band Lush. We went on tour around Europe, you know, with her, and then I enjoyed it so much that I talked to her bass player Ollie Shearer, and we decided, okay, well, we go around to it, but we need a guitarist and a singer. So my son's doing that.
Ah,
And so, you know, we did that last year. We played in France and Holland and Belgium, and it was great success. So it's just a trio, you know, and yes, we're playing the early Cure stuff. So
mm.
it's interesting, you know. And so, yeah, my son. It's funny because I think, you know, yourself being a musician, you will understand this, right? Because when we first started thinking about the idea of it, and I thought, well, Gray could do that because he can sing and he can play the guitar and he knows, you know, the songs, I'm sure. And okay, I thought, well, you know he can play because, you know, he'd been playing guitar since he was about 10 or something, you know. And so I know he can play, but I wonder if he could play in a band with me. You know, is that going to be a possibility? Because, you know, it's like poker tells. You have to have that sort of knowledge that you can go, okay, I know what he's going to do. He knows what I'm going to do. We don't have to talk. We can just, you know, we can feel each other's playing. And so beforehand, I thought, well, okay, well, we better have a rehearsal, just me and, you know, dad and son, just to see if we could do that before I commit him to it, you know. And so we hired a little studio in San Francisco where he lives, and we started playing. You know, we got some backing tracks, and we were playing along to them, just me and him. And after about an hour, I started to smile because I thought, oh, okay, he knows what I'm going to do. I can sense what he's going to do. It'll be fine, you know, because the worst thing is everybody in a band knows. In fact, I went to see a good friend of mine play last week, and it was the first show of the tour. And after the show, you know, I knew he would be despondent because he made like, you know, one tiny mistake, you know, and to him that got magnified over the whole show. And after the show, he was a bit downhearted, and I said to him, nobody except me and you noticed that, you know. The audience didn't care. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. So I said, you know, don't worry about it. But you know, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard because if you don't, it's not going to work, you know. So but it's funny. So yeah, yes, I'm taking my son on the road, and you know, I've done a couple of albums actually with my wife singing on it, you know, because she can sing as well. So yeah, I'm surrounded by musicians, you know. So
Mhm. That's going to happen. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Okay, so September 19th at Tally Hill Theater in downtown Leesburg, 2 nights of music across the whole downtown, 30 plus bands, and every dollar is going to children's charities in Loudoun County. For someone in the DC area deciding whether to come out that weekend, what would you like to say to them?
I'd say it's probably better than what's going on at the White House.
How you can be assured, yes. Okay, and then leaving aside the DC audience, what do you want your fans to know about you in general? I mean, we talked about the book, we talked about the new podcast, and of course, the story in Europe. What else?
Yeah.
Talk about yet?
Um, I don't know. I'll talk about, you know, I'll sort of expand what I'm talking about now, but I'll also take questions as well. So that's useful, you know, because I've done, like I say, quite a few book tours, and one one of the main delights of a book tour is, you know, hearing people's questions and that because they've always wanted to know certain things, and there I am. I can usually answer them, you know. Um, so you know that's fun as well. I think hopefully it'll be an illuminating night for me, and I hope so for everybody else as well.
Pleased to hear it. Okay, well, Lol, please stick around. We've got some business to take care of after, but thank you for spending this much time with us. Crossroads Music Festival is September 18th and 19th in downtown Leesburg, Virginia. Lol's at the Tally Ho Theater on the 19th for a conversation and book signing. And as you just heard, questions and answers. The tickets all support 5 children's charities in Loudoun County. The link will be in the show notes. And for everyone listening, you can find this interview and so much more at mastersradio.com. We are Masters Radio.